Okay, students, let me be the first to welcome you to Ed Leadership 8305. Some of you may have signed up for a course that had 7385 as the prefix. That's because when we redesigned some of the elements of the program the past 2 semesters, the 8305 section was still not finished as far as the registrar's office, so we had to create another course from one that currently existed. So anyway, it's not an issue. It's the same course. We'll know when we look at your transcript when you graduate. You had 8305, whether it says 7385. So welcome to you. This is designed to be one of our residency courses, meaning we really try to support the residency with it, but more than that, we take the theoretical or conceptual approach that job-embedded learning is the best way to approach the materials in this course. So let me just get right to that then. We've laid all this out so in the course of the entire program we address all of the standards that are required of educational leaders, and we have a lot more standards now than we had just a year ago. There's been an adoption of new standards. We now have 12 educational leadership standards. Most of the ones that we're dealing with in this course are from the standard, actually it's a new standard 8, but it's the effective management standard. If we contrast instruction and leading really with management, management is often viewed as more of the taking care of the operations, taking care of the things, making sure things are scheduled, making sure you have supervision in the cafeteria, making sure you have supervision in the parking lots, the kind of elements of leadership that have to do with taking care of the things, the processes, those are more typically viewed as management functions. So for purposes of this course, there's 3 large chunks of management that we're going to be addressing with, and one is human resources management, the recruiting, retaining, inducting, hiring of personnel, this whole idea of managing personnel. Arguably, a lot of those functions also require leadership skills, but in a sense, it's mostly accepted that human resources is a management responsibility more than a leadership responsibility. Other main area of content or focus for this course is the safety and operations piece. It stands without even needing to convince anybody that we certainly need to address safety somewhere in our program, robustly somewhere in the program, because of the consequences. And many of you, quite frankly, that are in an assistant principal role, you have been given care or charge perhaps of safety and operations in your school setting, so it's a very typical area of responsibility for leadership students. And then the third and last area for us to address in this course, certainly the Georgia Professional Standards Commission has an expectation that we will emphasize ethics and ethical behavior, and that leaders will be prepared in this state to manage the ethics of the employees in their charge, in their care. So we have an element of this course designed to make sure you're familiar with the Georgia requirements insofar as ethics. Whenever possible, I think I already mentioned this, we're going to try to use a job-embedded approach, meaning the assignments, as much as possible, will be from a framework. You would be, for example, not necessarily creating a scholarly paper to submit to a university professor, but rather your audience would be more of preparing a report for your job supervisor. And whenever possible, we want you to use your school, your job setting, your position to structure the activity around your work position. So for example, if you are working on the safety and operations assignment, one of those assignments, clearly we would want you, if you're assigned to do that in a school setting, we would want you to do that we would want you to practically implement that in your school setting, the school that you work in. If you're working at the district level, it may be appropriate to do the safety element for your district office, but if that's not appropriate, it would be considered that you would probably select one of the schools that somehow you have some responsibility for. They report to you or you support them in some way, and you select a school to do it that reports to you or that you support. So I guess I'm just trying to make the point, whenever possible, we want the work to be embedded in your job. And as I already mentioned, these 3 residency courses are designed really as a companion or corollary to the residency. You don't have to take them in any particular order. You don't even have to take them while you are taking the residency, but they are designed to support one another. As I mentioned already, our instructional approach will be mostly in the application approach rather than thinking about presenting work from the theoretical, academic, scholarly approach. Certainly there'll be some expectations for scholarship. We are a university and you will be earning a university degree, but the most obvious approach for us in this course is to emphasize learning by doing, learning in practice, studying in practice. So I just put it for an example here. You could certainly do, we're not doing that, I'm using this as an example, but there could be an assignment to study leadership and write an essay on leadership. For purposes of this course, we would emphasize things like having you interviewing actual practicing leaders rather than necessarily doing an extensive or exhaustive review of the literature on leadership. We would certainly want to have some practical approach to it as well. As far as where we begin, we're going to begin with the ethics component and the safety components first. And I don't mind being honest with you. One of the reasons why we're going to start with those 2 areas is I'm still really trying to struggle with what are the most critical pieces for us to work through in human resources management. It's such a large, important area of management, and this is really the only opportunity throughout our coursework, other than if it works its way into your residency plan. This is really the only time we're going to be addressing human resources management. And to be honest with you, I want to give some more thought to what this looks like as I'm making this video for you here on May 27th. So we'll get to human resources management, and I certainly won't give anybody a bunch of assignments at the last minute. But to be honest with you, the human resources management is an area that I'm still trying to consider what would be our best ways to approach this. Because this is a totally online course, that limits some of the things that I've done in the past with this when we've been able to do some simulations when we've actually met face-to-face. So I wouldn't say I'm struggling with this piece, but I want to give this piece some more thought. We do have some live sessions, and they are optional. I'm not taking attendance. I think I've only scheduled 3. We can have more if they're necessary. I don't know that they're going to be necessary. The purpose of the live sessions is to support you, make me available to you, and we try to use very good use of the time. I typically would have perhaps some content to discuss or share with you, probably want to discuss some of the assignments, want to respond to your questions, and at least one time, I think it's going to be the second optional session, and the date I should have put here on the PowerPoint slide, it's the middle part of June. At least one of those we're going to have a guest presenter Again, it's not a requirement. If you do not attend any of the live sessions, there's a recording that's available for your accessibility at your convenience. So, for example, if we have assignments tied into the guest presenter and you miss the guest presenter, obviously you would simply need to access the recording that will be available for you, and you wouldn't be able to interact in live time or real time with the presenter, but obviously you'd be able to access the information that was shared and discussed during that session. Just to finish up with a couple of details here, again, this was designed just to introduce you, to give you an overview of the course. As I've already mentioned, I still need to complete some refinements. Those may be done in the next few days, so that may be a moot point soon. But generally, as you look at the syllabus, you're going to see, or the Dropbox, when you get into the course site, you're going to see assignments are due consistently on Sunday evenings at midnight. And I try to be really careful to not spring anything on anybody at the last minute. So I try to give you plenty of time, and certainly don't change any dates to make things due sooner. Occasionally we have to extend deadlines to give you a little bit more time. But the bottom line, the approach for the course, I hope you're going to enjoy it, take a little bit, I don't want to say more of a light-hearted approach, but the approach is different. They are essentially, whenever possible, going to ask you to follow what I call a field-based inquiry model, but that can be somewhat troublesome for you if you have difficulty getting access to the information you need. So, for example, one of the things that we're probably going to be working in the human resources area would be for you to do some analysis in your own job setting, whether it's your school or your department if you're at the central office, and try to take a look at the job turnover that you've had. What's your retention rates in your areas? What is the information you can ascertain or determine about the turnover? Are there consistent reasons why people are leaving? Or if you're not collecting information from people who are leaving your school or your department, is that information maybe that should be made a priority to try to do exit interviews with employees who are leaving to try to understand what it is that's caused them to move on to different opportunities. So I'm trying to give you for example here, so obviously that's not information you're necessarily going to be looking up on the West Georgia Library, or you're not going to Google to find how many people have been hired in the last 5 years in your school and how many of those people are still there. So you're going to need the assistance of individuals in your school setting, and that's one of the reasons why we have partnership agreements. All of our students are working in districts where your district has agreed to support your job-embedded work, so that sometimes requires you to get some assistance or some help from people in your setting on collecting the kind of information that would be considered field-based, job-embedded kinds of experiences. So I just caution you that while I think sometimes that helps make the assignment seem a lot more real and meaningful to you, sometimes it also points out that there's some difficulty in getting access to the information you need. In some instances, maybe nobody's even collecting information, which would be useful for you to determine that now, and it might be a recommendation that would come out of your work or your assignment that, boy, we really need to have somebody collecting these data because they would be important for us to know. So anyway, looking forward to working with you. There are a couple of other classes of the same section here that a couple of my colleagues are teaching, so I think when it's reasonable and makes sense, for example, like if we have a guest speaker, we may very well be having that guest speaker offered to all of the different sections of this, so there might be some additional students participating in some of the activities online. For example, if we had a live online guest and you participated, there may be some students from another class as well. So anyway, looking forward to working with you. Appreciate you taking time to kind of try to get the overview from the course, and we'll look forward to working with you this semester.